Imagine a man who could not run, could not hunt, could not defend himself against a single predator. In his world, that's a death sentence. Survival of the fittest wasn't a theory, it was the law everyone lived by. He should have been left behind. But he wasn't. 10,000 years later, we found his grave, and it told us something no one expected. This world we call brutal was capable of something we don't give it credit for. Love. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, survival of the fittest is never going to mean the same thing to you again. We've all heard it. Prehistoric life was brutal, nasty, short, unforgiving. If you couldn't keep up with the group, you got left behind. That's just how nature works, right? That's the story we've been told. It's also a lie. Let's go to a cave in southern Italy, 10,000 years ago. A group of hunter-gatherers is burying a young man. But this isn't a careless burial. Red ochre is sprinkled over his body, a material so valuable in prehistoric cultures that it was often reserved for the most significant deaths. He's laid out with care, deliberately. When archaeologists studied his skeleton, they found the reason this burial stood out. This man stood barely 4 feet tall. He had a severe form of dwarfism. Think about what that meant in his world. Just a body that could not run as fast, throw as far, or carry as much as everyone else's. In a society where all of this were the difference between eating and starving. And yet he lived into his 20s. That doesn't happen by accident. That happens because someone looked at him and decided he was worth feeding, worth protecting, worth keeping alive. This is the tip of something much bigger, a pattern archaeologists have been quietly digging up for decades. Because that man in the cave isn't even the most extraordinary case. There's a teenager in Florida, an infant in France, a young man in Vietnam, a Neanderthal in Iraq. Each one should have died within days of becoming disabled. Except none of them did. In Florida, almost 8,000 years ago, a site called Wendover Pond is so waterlogged, so perfectly preserved, that archaeologists didn't just find bones there, they found brain tissue. Among the burials, they found a teenager with Spina Bifida, a condition so serious that even today, it requires surgery and mobility aids and a lifetime of medical care. This teenager could not have walked easily, may have had little control over parts of their own body. In a mobile hunting and gathering society, this child needed to be carried. And the evidence says they were. This teenager survived to around 15 years old. Somewhere out there, someone hoisted this child onto their back, across miles of unforgiving land. Because it needed to be done. Now go north, to a Neolithic farming village in France, 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. Archaeologists uncovered an infant's remains. The skull told them everything. A thickened bone structure, a small rounded cranium, the unmistakable signature of Down syndrome. This is believed to be one of the earliest confirmed cases of Down syndrome ever discovered. The baby didn't survive long. But here's the part that matters. This child wasn't cast out, wasn't buried apart from the others. This baby was buried inside the village, close to the homes of the living, wrapped in the exact same funerary care given to every other child in that community. Held exactly as any other baby would have been held. If there's one story that stops archaeologists in their tracks, it's this one. Man back, Vietnam. About 4,000 years ago, a young man is found completely paralyzed from the waist down, his upper body severely weakened, likely from a condition that struck him in early childhood. He could not walk. He could barely use his hands. And the wear patterns on his bones tell researchers something almost unbelievable. He lived for roughly a decade after his paralysis began. No wheelchairs, no modern medicine, no professional caregivers. Someone had to feed him, hydrate him, watch over him, every single day, in a world where every extra mouth to feed was a real cost to the group's survival. This case is now one of the most studied examples in an entire field of archaeology, a field with a name for exactly this phenomenon. But here's where it gets even more surprising. This pattern isn't just human. It's older than us. Shanidar Cave, Iraq. A Neanderthal skeleton researchers call Shanidar 1. This man was blind in one eye. His arm was withered and useless. He was likely deaf. Severe arthritis made basic movement painful. Could barely see. Could barely move without help. And he lived to what was, for a Neanderthal, an extraordinarily old age. We've spent decades picturing Neanderthals as brutish, simple, purely instinctual. But somewhere in that cave, a group of brutish, simple beings looked at one of their own who could offer almost nothing back in terms of physical labor, and kept him alive for years anyway. Now you cannot diagnose autism from a skeleton the way you can spot a bone deformity or a chromosomal marker. The evidence here is quieter, Unusual burial patterns, individuals given specialized roles, grave goods suggesting a person was seen as different, maybe even valued because they experienced the world differently. One of the most striking examples is a woman buried in Bad Dürrenberg, Germany, roughly 9,000 years ago, surrounded by an elaborate collection of animal bones, antlers, and turtle shells. Her skeleton also shows a rare cranial condition. Researchers now believe she may have held the role of a shaman. We will never know her inner mind, but we know her community didn't push her to the margins. They elevated her. And this isn't just ancient history. Anthropologists studying small-scale societies today have found the same thing. Neurodivergent individuals given roles as healers, storytellers, and spiritual guides, rather than being cast aside. All of these stories share something in common, and it has a name: the bioarchaeology of care. It's a framework for reading sustained human compassion directly out of bone. Fractures that healed, but only because someone set them and cared for the person while they mended. Bodies that survived conditions that should have killed them within days. Where patterns that can only be explained by years of being lifted, carried, and fed by someone else. These aren't just case studies. They're love letters, written in calcium and marrow, buried for thousands of years, and only now being read. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you prehistoric life was some perfect, idealized world of inclusion. It wasn't. These stories are remarkable because they were rare enough to leave a mark. Life was harsh. Resources were scarce. And in every era of human history, including this one, impossible choices have been made. But here's what these bones prove, beyond any doubt. The instinct to protect someone who is different from you, someone who can't keep up, can't contribute in the way everyone else can, is not a modern invention. It is older than agriculture, older than written language, older than almost everything we call civilization. Somewhere in a cave, a parent looked at a child who was different and decided that child was still theirs, still worth loving. That instinct survived ice ages. And somehow, against every cold calculation of survival of the fittest, it made it all the way down to us. If this story moved you, subscribe for more.